Immediately upon starting the game, you're greeted with your character waking up from some kind of cryogenic sleep on some sort of station somewhere. As you explore the ship, you notice that a lot of doors are defective and can't be opened. However, the doors that aren't defective will bring you to a series of rooms. Going up the ladder into the northern room will bring you to another hallway. A crate with a booklet on it lies in the middle of the hallway. Reading the various notebooks, pamphlets, and computers on the ship will tell you that you're on the Penrose 512, a spaceship made for exploring the solar system's edge to search for habitable planets, which seems to have had a hard landing and damaged the structure on the ship. A Gestalt pilot named A. Young, whose signal is unknown, and the replica unit LSTR-512, the player, who is usually just called Elster instead, were put onto the Penrose together, but the pilot is nowhere to be found other than some small traces. If it wasn't obvious, your character is a robot of sorts. Her feet are pegs, which make her look very inhuman, and she has markings on her face that make her really stand out. Upwards is a room with another cryogenic storage, but nobody is inside, and all that remains is a broken keycard. If you go back into one of the other rooms, you'll find some duct tape. You can use your combine ability to fuse the two items together, making a working keycard. Going all the way back on the second floor of the ship will bring you to the pilot's room, and outside you can barely see anything other than a huge blizzard outside. Looking at the computer on the left, you notice a photo that's been damaged to the point you can only make out what's on the right side. It's a woman with white hair, but on the back is the code for that cryo storage from earlier with the key. It isn't really explicit who the woman with the white hair is, but we can safely assume that it's probably that A. Young person I mentioned before. Using the keycard on the airlock, which was to the left after exiting the bridge, you get access to the spacesuit, and after you put it on, you have to traverse a snowy area coated in massive snowstorm. You can clearly see many stone pillars and what looks to be like ruins, which implies something may have been living here. After traversing through these, you are led to a large, eerie-looking hole in the ground with some stairs. With no real option other than to go there for shelter, you head on down, and the hole is a bit dark and very red. You'll notice an even darker hole on the back side of the wall, and going inside will take you to what seems to be some sort of office with plenty of textbooks, a computer and radio too, and a flag of whatever country you're in. In front of the radio lies a book called The King in Yellow, which is an actual book written by Robert W. Chambers. After you pick it up, the radio starts to play a message. This is probably pretty obvious, but before this video continues, I'd like to mention this video will have spoilers for all of the game's endings, and I highly recommend playing this game before watching. It's a very good game, and I really think that anybody who wants to partake in this game should. But that's my warning. Signalis is a game released in late 2022, and it was developed by Rose Engine, which consists of two German illustrators / game developers, Yuri Stern and Barbara Whitman, or by their online aliases Antihelios and Replicant. They've been making games since 2014, which is also the year when Signalis was put into concept. Their older work is also quite charming, and I'll link it with Signalis in the description for those who are interested in playing their games. Since the game has come out, it had quite a few awards given to it, and I'll show them on screen right now. I'm not reading all of this out loud, so if you want to know, then just pause now and take a look. But pretty much, Signalis is a top-down indie psychological horror game with a lot of PS1 type visuals about a robot girl named Elster who's trying to look for her girlfriend. The game perfectly encapsulates what life is like living in Germany. Okay, I have made like 2 interjections in this entire video, but I have already rendered the video at this point. This video has already been rendered, and I finished everything. I finished doing literally everything. It's already uploaded on the channel, and it was scheduled. And just this morning, I found out that the game just got an update, a big update, which literally fundamentally changes this entire game. And this entire video was written based off the last update. So I just have to like straight up record this whole thing just to mention that I have no idea about anything from this update. So I'm not going to like mention anything, and I'm still going to be talking about the game as if this update never came out. I will talk about this in like a community note or something, but basically they changed they changed the game. So you can adjust the inventory capacity, which is huge because before you only had like 6 options, and now by default the flashlight and the eidetic module, which I'm probably going to mention later, I don't know when I'll interject this little recording thing, they don't take up inventory slots anymore, which is like huge. All this stuff can be toggled in the settings, so it's like it's a huge thing, but it's also like if you don't like this, then you can turn it off too. Yeah, there's other options too. You can also use health items when you're at full health to dispose of them. That's kind of cool. Improved interaction angles. So this might be pretty big too. I complained about interaction angles kind of with doors later. There's like no place where I can interject this, so you're kind of getting like this without like the extra knowledge of what I'm even talking about. I mentioned in the introduction that the book The King in Yellow appears, which as stated before is a real book that you can go read right now. I didn't get very far into it myself, but you can kind of see some of the similarities between The King in Yellow and Signalis. And The King in Yellow is by Robert W. Chambers, as I said before. If you didn't notice during the cutscene, it plays a part of Raindrop Prelude by Frederick Chopin. The implementation of a lot of like real-world songs as well as literature and art give Signalis its own interesting twist on the already interesting gameplay it has. Of course, having like real-world literature and art isn't like a unique thing for these types of games. Resident Evil 1 is one of my favorite games of all time, and also plays a certain piano tune. I forget which one it was, but there's a part where you have to find like sheet music. If you've played the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I do like learning about this type of real world stuff because I didn't know like half of these things were already existing things. But yeah, speaking of the gameplay's pretty fun. I'm kind of a dumbass, so I had to look up game guides for like half of the game's puzzles because I just kept getting stuck the first time I played. But I had fun with them. Some of them, maybe not as much, but genuinely most were pretty good. Some were run-of-the-mill and pretty basic, but there are some that were pretty unique, like this one with the elemental key cards where you had to go do different puzzles that correlated with each key's element, or this one where you have to unlock a key on the painting Isle of the Dead by Arnold Bachlin, which is a pretty important symbol throughout the game, When I first started writing this script back in June of 2023, I never really played any of these like survival horror games, but after playing through a few of the older Resident Evil games, I can really see where this game got its inspiration from. I do like the puzzles a lot. The way they implemented a lot of them is very immersive and pretty interesting, and I like the exploration part of all of it too. Of course, they do have their downsides. It does get really goddamn annoying having to run place to place to place to place, but I guess that's sort of a norm when it comes to these types of games, so it's not really a big gripe that I have. However, it can get pretty annoying since you only have 6 inventory slots, so you have to go all the way back to the safe room, put something away, go where you need to go, put in the key, rinse and repeat. But as I said, when I started writing this script, it was back before I had played any other real survival horror game, so while it may have been really annoying back then, after replaying the game it just isn't as annoying as it used to be. I think the combat is pretty good and not too complicated. It is very reminiscent of Resident Evil. Overall, the game does feel decently nice to play, other than when it doesn't let you open a door while you're running away from enemies, and then you get your ass handed because of it. Yeah, for some reason, all of the times that I played this game, opening doors was just a real pain. I'd like approach it and then have to spam the button to open it. I thought it was an issue with one of the controllers I was using, because I used quite a few of controllers to play it, or like just an issue on one platform, because not only did I play this on both Xbox and Switch, I used 4 different controllers to play through the game. The controllers I used were the wired GameCube controller for the Switch, the Xbox One controller, the Switch Pro controller, and the Switch Joy-Cons. I used the Joy-Cons both in the screen mode, the connected to the TV, and every time I played I just had that weird issue with the doors. Like, it wasn't a massive issue really, but I found myself getting kind of ticked off when it happened, since it wasn't a constant thing, but it still was happening. Also, the movement itself in general is just like, it's a little bit moving around wasn't too bad, but you'll get used to it. It was just a little bit annoying on the first playthrough. Regardless, I still had fun with the gameplay, even like despite its flaws. Moving on, I decided I'll do an entire section just dedicated to the weapons, because they're all pretty varying, but I'll get the job done pretty well. Okay, here I'm adding this before I actually start talking about the weapons in this game, because I did not know this, that there is actually a machete in the game. It's not something that you can actually obtain in the game, but there is a machete in the files, and I thought that was cool. I didn't know that because I don't play this game on PC, or I didn't play this game on PC any of the times that I played through it. There's just a straight up machete that you can cheat into the game if you use like what's it called, console commands or whatever, the debug menu. But yeah, there is a machete. I thought I should just add that. I don't know anything about the machete. I just saw that when I was gathering like pictures to put in here. That's all I really have to say. First off, we have the pistol. The pistol is an alright gun. It gets the job done, and the ammo for it is the most common in the game. It holds about 10 rounds, which is the most out of any gun in the game, but is also the weakest. It works though, and is very helpful, because most enemies don't really take many hits to end up just taking down. Secondly, the shotgun. The shotgun is the second weapon you're going to find, and is a big step up from the base pistol. If you can angle your shots right, you can pretty much one-tap most basic enemies with it. And the ammo isn't rare, but it isn't common either. Overall, it's one of my favorite weapons to use, actually. Thirdly is the revolver. The revolver is actually a weapon that you can pretty easily miss, as it's one optional where you need to unlock a box to actually get it. The revolver is pretty alright, and it's basically just a buffed up pistol, and the ammo is slightly less common. Overall, I think it's pretty decent. Since ammo isn't really as easy to come across, I was always less likely to use it in game. Next up is the flare gun. Now, the flare gun is actually more unique to the rest of the weapons, as you can load not only flares, which light your enemies on fire, but you can also load grenade shells into it to cause explosions to kill multiple enemies at once. Think of the grenade launcher from Resident Evil. So it is pretty powerful. It does mean that ammo will be very rare for it, so best to just not waste that much shells for it. But overall, I think the weapon's pretty good, and it does very well to take out enemies and actually permanently kill them off. Its enemies will get up from any other weapon. You have to either use flares or use thermite, which I'll talk about later, in order to actually keep them down by burning them. But after that, we have the rifle. The rifle is given to you later in the game and takes Nitro Express ammo. It's an alright weapon and can take out multiple enemies with one shot. That is, if you can actually line your shots right. The ammo also isn't very common, but isn't very rare either. And overall, I think the weapon does pretty well. For our final weapon, we have the submachine gun. The submachine gun is the last gun that you'll actually get in the game, and is also one of the best weapons in the game. It fires bursts of ammo rather than one singular shot at a time, so it is quite powerful. However, there are some setbacks. The ammo is very scarce, as it is an endgame item, so it's pretty much next to useless unless you save all of the ammo for the boss fight at the end. Overall, I do think the gun is pretty good, and very good actually. I already said that it's the best weapon in the game, at least in terms of damage, but overall I probably wouldn't ever use it other than just easily mow down enemies on my way to the actual final boss. After the weapons, we have the equipment. Equipment takes up its own spot under the health monitor, but they'll also take up inventory space, of course. Equipment ranges from things that'll help you navigate to things to keep your enemies at bay for a while, or things that'll just straight up wipe out your enemies too. The first of these that you'll find is the disposable stun prod. It's a decent piece of equipment that shocks an enemy when you use it on anything and creates a strobe light effect whenever you use it on an enemy. It knocks said enemy down, but you'll have to stomp on the enemy to actually keep it down for a little while. Early in the game, but after that, you'll find the eidetic module, which is an eyeball that allows you to take visual memories, or just photos basically. You'll only find this once ever, and personally I never had any use for it. Never in any of my playthroughs did I actually use this item. You just might as well take screenshots instead.
I don't think we even want this.
Can you put it in your own eye?
We all have, I think so, yeah, but look, it takes up your tool slot.
What?
It just lets you take a screenshot in game. That's useless. We have a camera. We have phones.
Yeah, we have phones. We have modern technology. Hey, game developers, doy.
I'm sure that's...
Hey, game developers, duh.
A bit early, but not after you learn the mechanics a little bit more. You'll find a flashlight. The flashlight is probably the most important item that you can actually get your hands on for a good portion of the game. Many rooms are pitch black or just very dark, even with the brightness up all the way. And you won't be able to actually interact with anything without it, and you'll also most likely get jumped by an enemy if you don't have it on too. Sadly, it will take up an inventory spot, so be wary of that. Another item you can get is the auto injector. If you equip it, you can basically save yourself if you end up dying, because it'll save your life right before then and heal you. Or you can use it on its own, and it'll basically work like one of the repair sprays that you can find. After that, we have the thermite. This is the last real equipment item that you can find. It also happens to be one of the best ones that you can get. I mentioned earlier that the thermite can be used to burn enemies, and once you burn enemies, basically you're ensuring that they don't ever get up again. It can be good to use for areas that you'll be going to multiple times, have a bunch of enemies at them. This makes thermite probably one of the best equipment items that you can get other than the flashlight. Next up, we have the visuals. I really like the visuals in this game. The models look like something out of a PS1 game, and I'm all for that style. I'm pretty sure that's like exactly what they were going for, but I really do like that style. And there's certain aspects of the game that almost seem like uncanny to me. I'm not really sure if that's the right word, but something about everything just seemed off. Certain things in the game seem high-tech and futuristic, while on the other hand you have all these things that look like they're from the 80s or 90s. Like the X-ray scanner, which looks like an analog horror footage. Or literally any of the monitors and radio stuff that are in the game. I'm hoping I'm not the only person who thought of this while playing. And, a lot of the imagery, especially like the cutscenes, reminded me a bit of the end of Evangelion, or something of the likes. I don't know if that was intentional, but regardless, I still like the visual aspects of everything. Everything looks like it fits, but like barely, and I mean that in a good way too. The characters also look good too, and their actual models, they don't have faces. other than a certain part where they do. But I feel like this works pretty well, actually. And it adds to the ambiguity of it all, if that makes any sense. But it does also kind of fit with that PSX style that the game is going for. The different replicas and their portraits look mostly similar, at least in regards to their faces, which could either be just the art style or like an intentional design choice. But even then, they still look very different design-wise, and you can make out what type of character they are before you even read their descriptions, kind of. The enemies, however, the enemies in the game are all supposed to be replica units, and some of them even still retain aspects of the descriptions and personalities that they've had, even after they've become the abominations you've seen throughout the game. One that stood out to me was Myrna. It's one of the only ones that doesn't really end up becoming different than her usual self, because her whole body is just one big juggernaut, face underneath, which pukes a lot of blood. At some point you can meet a friendly Myrna unit, but based on what she says, she probably never made it afterwards. If you're interested in knowing what enemies are supposed to be what replicas, there's some pretty good posts online which can detail and draw some similarities between them to find out which, and they're pretty good. But that's all I really have to say about the enemies. I stated this earlier on, but there's a fair amount of music composed by the likes of Beethoven, Chopin, and other musicians of the sort. There isn't much music that plays in the main hallways or anything, other than some ambient tracks, but there are occasional times where you find a room with music, or you find some music playing at some point. However, when enemies appear, that's a different story. Immediately after you get spotted, loud music starts to play, with what I can only assume is supposed to be smashing or clanging metal in the background, which makes fighting all the more stressful, especially when worker replicas start climbing out of the floorboards to try and kill you while you're trying to look for stuff. It definitely does get the point across. I think the music in Signalis is actually really good, and really does reinforce like that survival horror feel that it's trying to go for. But other than that, I don't really have much else to say about the music. So far, all I've shown you is the game, the music, the graphics, the surface of it all. And really just like a simple look at it. On my first playthrough, I looked at all of this and I said, oh, well, whatever I'm looking at now is supposed to be like a literal representation, right? I could not have been further from the truth. There are a ton of things that I've skipped over. This game's story is probably one of the biggest aspects of it because of how fucking confusing it is. After this long series of monstrosities, gore, zombies in the beginning, Elster goes through this void of nothingness with a bunch of like tall black rocks laid about. It seems familiar, right? Eventually you find multiple other Elsters dead on the ground as if there was others with the same goal as you. There's another point in the beginning where a bunch of other dead Elsters are in the elevator after you got pushed back in. Is this supposed to be some sort of literal interpretation, or are these really other Elsters programmed with the same goal as you? Or maybe is it supposed to symbolize something? Elster finds the Penrose again and tries to climb on it and open the door. In the process, she rips her arm off by accident, rolls off the ship onto the ground, and dies. The credits then play. After this, you're sent back to the menu where the once alive eye of Elster that would aim where you went on the menu is now lifeless. It seems as if the game is over, right? It seems like unsatisfactory, almost. You died, so naturally you'd say, well, that's the end. That's all. That's all, folks. Time to wrap it up. But that's just not true. Signalis is like more than just like a normal horror game that makes you question things and messes with you a little bit. It's a game that makes you search and search and search more and more and more for things you probably won't ever end up finding. And you might drive yourself insane by the end trying to find them. I feel that the game doesn't have a concrete answer to almost anything. A definite solution or answer doesn't exist for the most part. It really isn't even known whose memories Elster has, or if the world really is like this, or it's, you know, Arian's psychic powers that are leaking off into the world and causing the gory mess that the Penrose became. After starting the game anew from the fake out ending, you'll wake up in the same room as the intro from the beginning of the game. But something seems a bit off. The lights are on, and while you're walking around, you'll see that the ship is actually in motion and it's completely clean and hasn't crashed. After looking around more, you will find some more classified information about you. Stuff that you probably shouldn't see, but you'll probably end up seeing anyways. If you do read the notes, you'll find out that the replica model that you play as is a bit different from the others, more ways than one. Elster's neural pattern was based off of a soldier, and it says to not leave the Elster unit alone and interact as little as possible. Especially don't talk to her about the war. Do not show her photos, movies, or even let her listen to music. And finally it says, do not try to befriend the Elster unit. Despite what all that says, on other notes left by Ariane, it seems she totally contradicts these orders by interacting with Elster and showing her things regardless. If it wasn't already obvious by this point, Elster and Ariane are clearly more than just assigned crewmates. After this whole bit, another cutscene will play with Ariane and Elster dancing. Then after this, you wake up again, severely damaged and in the same room as before. Making your way to the emergency cryo room from before, you'll find another replica dead on the floor. You're missing an arm and your rib cage has been exposed, so you do what needs to be done. The cryo room here is where Ariane stored herself. In 2 of the game's endings, Elster dies right here. At least that's what is implied. This is the same spot that Replica was at from before. It's supposed to make you question whether or not that was another Elster that you found, who managed to die the exact same way that you did. And then there's a pile of gore inside. Like, is this another Ariane, or is it supposed to be some sort of thing that she's spawned from her psychic abilities or something? Is this literal or symbolism? Is this a cycle? Is it some kind of infinite loop? You start out in the same bathroom as you did at the start of the game, only this time gore has covered the entire room. Not just that, but the entire facility has been covered in gore as well. It's most likely that most of this isn't real, but it's also more likely that all of this is created by Ariane as a result of her powers, since the left and right doors end up becoming covered with gore as well, keeping you from ever entering them again as you exit them. The rest of the floor is almost exactly the same as at the beginning, but this time it's much more bloody and some of the rooms are now blocked off with even more gore than the doors I mentioned before. There's a lot of questions that are either impossible to answer or are really hard to answer, and literally the Game Zone fanbase still doesn't have all the answers even 2 years later. If I had to describe this game, I would describe it as a beautiful yet disturbing way to screw with the senses. Our minds default to immediately trying to uncover the truth of something, while this game actively hides it. Even after the secret 4th ending, which required you to find 3 keys to unlock a safe to find Ariane's Lily at the start of the game, you're still really left without answers. You're actually left with more questions, I would say. Like, did Ariane recover from her cancer that was eating away at her quick enough to be able to dance with Elster, or is there really a proper end to this game? Elster and Ariane are both severely damaged and broken from all the hell that they went through by the end of the game, but it's not really left with an answer. And this leads me to my conclusion. I think it should be known that Signalis has a story which is intentionally convoluted. It makes no sense to many because there probably isn't any sense to even be made. For the past 2 years, we still don't know some crucial information, and I think that's what the beauty of this game is. It goes to show that you don't need to know the answers, and you don't need to throw the answers at the player's face, because they might just end up finding them on their own or never finding them at all. And while never uncovering the truth is usually seen as an inherently negative conclusion, There's literally entire games about that. Just look at Persona 4. That game's whole plot is just about uncovering the truth. I think some mysteries are specifically made to not be uncovered. This might in fact be one of those mysteries. So, what can I tell you about this game? What are my famous last words for this video? I don't know. And I think that's fine.